US.50. It says to explain the role of geographic and military factors on the outcomes of battle in the Pacific and European theaters, including the battles of Midway, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and DDay. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to kind of label some of these locations on a map. And World War II happens in two different locations. It happens in the Pacific for the United States, and it's going to happen in the European theater. So this one we're looking at war in the Pacific. So let's just label these places. Okay, the first one over here on our list is we got to label Hawaii. All right, Hawaii is where Pearl Harbor was attacked, and that's really the event that's going to get the United States into World War II. The second island that we got to label is Okinawa. Okinawa is all the way over here. This is the final island that the United States is going to assault during World War II. Third island is Iwo Jima. I'll talk about Iwo Jima here in a second. Iwo Jima is probably one of the most famous battles. The most famous photograph comes from there as well. Japan, all the way up here. Our ultimate goal is to be able to take over Japan during World War II. And just some other countries so you know where they are. Here's Australia down here. Okay. China is up here. Korea is right here. Midway. Midway is another really, really important island. Here is Midway. As you can probably guess, it's midway across the Pacific Ocean. And then the last one is another important one, is the Philippines. Okay, so there's your islands. Now the other thing it says draws arrows detailing the advance of the United States on Japan. So when we invaded the Pacific, there were two real drives to try to defeat the Japanese. The first one was led by Douglas MacArthur, and it's going to drive through the South Pacific. So it's going to start here in Hawaii, and it's going to work its way all the way through here, up to the Philippines this way. All right, the other drive is going to be led by Chester Nimitz. It's going to start here, and it's going to kind of snake its way all the way here to Japan. But the idea was two separate drives that are independent of each other. They're forcing the Japanese to fight on multiple fronts. Now we got a map of Europe, so we're going to look at some of the major things that happen in Europe. And first, we've got some countries that we need to label. So the first one is Italy. Okay, and we'll draw some arrows. So I'm going to write Italy down here. And we'll draw an arrow to Italy. There you go. All right, so there's Italy, check. Nazi Germany. This huge section right here, and obviously this is like midway through World War II. Okay, Germany wasn't at the start of World War II that big of a country. The third one is Great Britain. So I'm going to put GB for Great Britain. All right, the location of the D-Day invasion. The D-Day invasion is going to happen right here. And the D-Day invasion is when we finally invade Europe, when our soldiers finally take the fight to Hitler. A few other ones, we got Paris, we got a few cities. Paris is the star right here. All right, Berlin, that's the capital of Germany. And then the other major capital is Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union. All right, the next thing it says, color the arrows of the advance for the U.S. in blue. All right, the two areas that the United States is going to advance is we're going to first advance through the south part of Europe, right down here through Italy. All right, and our other area of advance is going to be from Great Britain across the English Channel into France. This color the arrows of the advance for the Soviet Union yellow. Okay, the Soviet Union over here on the east is going to advance west into Germany. So if you really look at it, we're kind of, surrounding Germany, making it fight on multiple fronts, which is going to be a key reason they're defeated. All right, it says to color Nazi Germany red. Just kind of shade in a little bit of it. We're not going to shade in every single bit of Nazi Germany red. Just kind of hit the high points here. All right, color Soviet Union yellow. Here's the Soviet Union all up here. All right, color Italy blue. And lastly, color Britain green. So there you go. There's your breakdown of kind of the Europe map, giving you a good idea of what's going on in all the different countries. So the first major battle is going to be the Battle of Midway, and the Battle of Midway is probably one of the biggest turning points in World War II for the United States. So what happens in the Battle of Midway is the U.S. is going to set a trap for the Japanese. So let's put that U.S. sets trap for Japanese. And the way we do this is we were actually able to break Japan's communication code. So each country, when they communicate over the radio, they're doing code. We break their code, figure out their plans, and set the ultimate trap for the Japanese. Now, the Japanese had no idea when they came to attack Midway that our aircraft carriers were here. So if you look at the diagram up here, down here in the bottom left, these three ones that I'm coloring red, these are Japan's aircraft carriers. They had 4 of them that were attacking Midway. All right, the United States, I'll color ours in blue, we only had 3. But what we had done is we had hidden them back behind the island, which is this circle, to where the Japanese didn't know they were there. So when Japan is going to attack, it's going to be a huge surprise for them what happens. So kind of the way this goes, okay, the Japanese are going to launch their planes, they're going to attack the island of Midway. So they launch them from these aircraft carriers, and they fly to the island of Midway to bomb them. All right. While they're doing that, the United States is going to launch our own aircraft carriers, our planes on our aircraft carriers, but they're going to avoid the Japanese planes, and they're going to fly around them to try to get back here to the unprotected now Japanese aircraft carriers. So while Japan's planes are bombing the little island of Midway, our aircraft carriers and their planes are attacking the Japanese. And so we actually sink 3 of the Japanese carriers that day. So this carrier is gone, this carrier is gone, this carrier is gone. That's a huge success for America on day 1. So on day 1, the U.S. sinks 3 of Japan's carriers. And by the time Japan realized it was a trap, it was too late. We had already destroyed 3 of these aircraft carriers. And the 3 that went down for Japan was the Agaki, so we'll mark it out. The Kaga went down, and the final one that went down was the Soryu. Day 2 of the battle is going to be more the same for the United States. So the first thing that happens is Japan is actually able to identify where our aircraft carriers are. So once again, we'll color Japan's red down here. We'll color the 3 that we had on day 2 of the battle blue. So Japan is quickly going to be able to locate our aircraft carriers on day 2 of the battle, which is big for Japan because they've got to be able to, exact some type of vengeance. And what ends up happening is Japan actually cripples one of our aircraft carriers. They take down our aircraft carrier, the Yorktown. So they actually sink it. The United States planes are then launched, and they're searching for the Japanese plane, or the Japanese aircraft carrier, sorry. They find it, they locate it, they attack it, and they destroy the final Japanese aircraft carrier that was at the Battle of Midway. Now, when the Yorktown was hit, like we talked about earlier, it didn't just sink immediately. It was actually able to make it away from the battlefield, and then a Japanese sub later locates it and is going to sink the aircraft carrier. But when you look at it, you're looking at the final numbers of this battle. Japan loses 4 aircraft carriers. The U.S. is going to lose 1 carrier. And I mean, that's a pretty obvious, amount of victory right there. And, the biggest thing that Midway does, and this is the big takeaway that I want you to get from the Battle of Midway, is it changes the tide. Okay, no longer is Japan going to be the one attacking, America's going to be attacking. And the reason being is because when Japan lost all 4 of these aircraft carriers, they can't really attack anymore. They have to kind of go with what the United States is going to do. And so that's going to be the biggest thing about the Battle of Midway is it changes the tide. The tide is shifting. It's now in support of America. The next major battle that we're going to discuss in the Pacific Ocean is Iwo Jima. And Iwo Jima is probably one of the most famous assaults in the Pacific. So before we can really understand the fight on Iwo Jima, you have to understand the overall U.S. strategy, and it was called island hopping. And what island hopping is where the United States would kind of hop or move from island to island in the Pacific, working their way to Japan. And now the thing about island hopping is they didn't always take every single island. They kind of picked and choose. And Iwo Jima was one of those islands that they had to choose. And the reason they had to choose Iwo Jima is the U.S. needs a place to launch planes against Japan. So the important thing about Iwo Jima, where it was located, is it was super close to Japan. And so we were able to station planes on here after the battle and actually reach the Japanese homeland to attack it. But the way that the battle went down is the United States is going to land on these landing beaches right here. I'm going to color the beaches red right here. All right, so we land here. Our soldiers are going to experience very heavy fighting. I'm talking direct frontal assault. The Japanese are dug in. They had hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath the soil on the Iwo Jima. The fighting was brutal. By the end of day one, the Americans have taken, well, not really day one, but by the early part of the battle, they've taken almost half the island. One of the biggest moments is down here. It happens on the southwestern tip of the island on what's called Mount Suribachi. And the reason Mount Suribachi is so important is this is the location of probably one of the most famous photographs in American history. It's this photograph down in the bottom left corner. It's the famous flag raising that happened while the fighting was actually going on. So real quick, we're just going to label the guys that were actually in this flag raising photograph. They became instant celebrities. The first one down here in the bottom, the one that's at the very base of the flag, his name was Harlan Block. And Harlan Block is going to die shortly after the picture was taken, which is sad because most of these guys do end up dying. The one right here in the very middle is going to be John Bradley. Now, John Bradley survives. And what's cool about John Bradley is John Bradley's son is going to write a book called Flags of Our Fathers, and it's the story about all of these flag raisers and what ended up happening to them. The third guy in this list right here is on the other side of John Bradley right there. You can see him just a little bit. His name is Reen Gagnon. Reen is also going to survive the fighting. The one kind of, you can see his hand like right there. His name is Michael Strank. Okay, Michael Strank ends up dying in the fighting shortly after the picture. The next one over here, you can see he's on the other side. He's right here. You can see him right there. His name is Franklin Soulsey. And the fourth, or the final one, not the fourth, is Ira Hayes. All right, and Ira is another one that survives. So the three guys that survived the fighting, you had John Bradley, whose son, like we said, is going to write the famous book. You had Reen Gagnon is going to be one of the survivors, and then Ira Hayes is your final survivor of this flag raising picture. So on the final day, or towards the end of the battle, the United States is going to have to continue its push all the way across the island, and is going to have to continue to, find these Japanese soldiers one at a time, and be able to, find these guys and kill them. Very few Japanese soldiers are actually captured in the battle. It's just a brutal battle. It really is. Some of the highest casualty numbers in World War II are going to happen right here on Iwo Jima. The final battle in the Pacific is the Battle of Okinawa. And Okinawa, the most important thing about Okinawa is it's 350 miles away from Japan. So it's really, really close to Japan. And, at this point, we kind of thought we were actually going to have to take the Japanese homeland. And so when we invaded Okinawa, our idea was it was going to be a launching point for the invasion of Japan. All right, and our soldiers, when they attacked Okinawa, the landing beaches that they're going to use is going to be right here on this coast. And so what happens is at Okinawa, it's a little different from Iwo Jima. The Japanese soldiers didn't defend every single location. So when we first landed, our Marines are going to assault and take the northern part of the island. And what's weird about it is there's really no defenders there. Whereas the Army who is there, they're going to turn south, and they're going to take this lower part of the island, and they are going to run into the heavy resistance. because it was down here in this bottom half where the Japanese decided to pretty much mount their #1 defense. And the Japanese main defense, I'll draw it down here, was called the Shiri Line. All right, so the Shiri Line is right over here. And what this was their major defensive line where the Japanese are really going to exact their toll on these American attackers. And so this little area down here in Okinawa, sure, it looks small, but it's going to take months. It's going to take forever to finally capture. Our soldiers literally have to, hunt down these Japanese soldiers in their rifle pits, in these, bunkers in the ground, and it's just an absolute brutal type of fighting. The other big thing that's going on while Okinawa is going on is this new thing that the Japanese start using called kamikazes. And what a kamikaze is a suicide bomber, and you probably heard about them. What they would do is they would, fly their planes into our boats, try to blow them up. It just really kind of shows how desperate the Japanese are. All right, so the kamikaze would put desperation. All right, they're resorting to that to try to beat the United States. And that kind of gives the whole idea of Japan's philosophy at this battle. It wasn't necessarily to win. Japan knew at this point they couldn't defeat the United States. What the Japan wanted to do is they wanted to show the U.S. how deadly it would be to take Japan. So that was their goal. They said, you know what, we know we can't win, but if we make Okinawa so bad, the Americans will lose faith and they won't invade Japan and we won't lose World War II. So the final battle we're going to talk about real quick is D-Day. And D-Day, we're going to kind of shift gears and go over to the European theater. D-Day, what D-Day is, it's the invasion of France. It's the U.S.-led invasion of France. All right, and this is a huge operation, a huge undertaking. It's going to be led by Dwight D. Eisenhower, who we've talked about before. He's a 5-star general. All right, the code name for this assault is going to be Operation Overlord. The location where D-Day happens is in Normandy, France. Okay, so just the way the invasion went, the Germans had really done a good job defending the beaches at D-Day to try to make it, very, very difficult for us to be able to get our soldiers ashore onto the beach. And so if you look at this little diagram in the top right corner, this shows us the different beach defenders. So what's down here in the bottom left, this part down here, this is where our boats were. All right, and these boats were called Higgins boats. They were what was carrying our soldiers ashore. And when they were going ashore, they had 4 or 5 different things they had to work their way through. All the while, they're going to get shot at by machine guns. So at the top of the beach on these cliffs, this is where the machine guns are. So the entire time our soldiers are going through all these obstacles, these German machine guns are just constantly just shooting down, attacking the men, making them, this beach a living hell on earth. So the first thing they have to get through is these 7-foot gates. So it's really kind of like a fence. And when they land, they have to kind of wade through it or they have to blow it up. It's just something to obstruct them, to slow them down. The next thing they've got are these kind of like, I guess you call them like ramps, and they had like mines and stuff attached to them. And these ramps would try to like, once again, kind of break up their ability to get through, kind of make things a lot more difficult. These last things, and if you've seen some movies about D-Day, you've probably seen these, they were called hedgehogs. And what they were basically like metal that was like X'd. And so what the idea of that was, it's just another barrier that they have to work through. And if America tried to land tanks, they weren't going to be able to make it. And so remember, the whole time they're doing this, they're getting shot about machine guns. They're going through this long list of obstacles, and it's amazing that our soldiers were successful. It just speaks to the ability of our soldiers. Last thing real quick, let's just look at the 5 beaches that were actually attacked. So it wasn't just one beach that was invaded on D-Day. We attacked 5 different ones. The first one over here on the left is Utah Beach. Okay, Utah Beach was one of the beaches taken by the United States. The other beach, the second one right here, is Omaha. And Omaha is the most famous one. That's where the most brutal fighting was. If you've seen movies of D-Day, that's where it takes place. The third beach was actually invaded by the Canadians, go figure. And the final 2 beaches were taken by the British. So Juno was their beach, and Sword was the other beach that they took. All right, and this invasion is going to be kind of the beginning of the end for Hitler, because Hitler never really realizes that this is the actual invasion. He thinks the invasion is coming at a different location. And so this invasion is definitely going to be the beginning of the end for Adolf Hitler.